Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Tali Markajani, and I am joined by Dr. Ann Hussain, who's my colleague and fellow naturopathic doctor. So, Ann, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I am a naturopathic doctor, as you mentioned. I practice in Aurora, Ontario. I am all about menstrual health and fertility. So I work a lot with women between the ages of 18 and 50, talking about their periods, optimizing their periods, and like the three overarching kind of themes of my practice end up being self-awareness, self-compassion, and self-advocacy. I personally have a history of PCOS, and that was a diagnosis that was missed for so long. So I'm really about all about like keeping track of what's happening in your body, so you can advocate better for yourself.
Cool. This is really cool. And it's cool that you apply those three concepts, which you could essentially apply to
To
everything
anything
health
in life,
related,
yeah, or in
to the
any
period.
life, really, yeah.
Mhm. How do you see, like, I'm curious about the self-compassion part of the period health. Like, how do you apply that, or how does that show up in the work you
So
do?
self-compassion kind of for me it's not just self-compassion, it's also like self-care. It's
Mm,
also like it's this overarching concept. So self-compassion, as in I do a lot of period literacy work, so I'm teaching women about the hormonal changes that are happening in their cycles. And we're never taught this idea of a fluctuating a state of being, right? Because your hormones are doing kind of this dance throughout your cycle, but we're taught that you should do this on a daily basis, but we don't necessarily feel like
mm,
this every day. Like we're fluctuating as well, especially with the hormonal shifts. So, for example, during the period, there's some blood loss. The first couple of days can be a little bit low energy. And then as we move toward ovulation after that, energy typically rises, motivation rises, people feel better, they feel the most like themselves. That's what I hear from patients.
mhm,
And I can attest to that too. Like I feel my best and I am able to do more of the productive work and more of the planning and taking action sort of thing in that phase between, day 3 of my cycle, day 1 being my period, and then all the way until, a week before my period, which is when, the
mm,
hormones do this downward dip. And usually that's the time for me to rest more. So I might push myself a little bit more in the middle of my cycle, and at the end of my cycle, I might be like, okay, I'm not feeling it. Instead of, just fighting against the lowered energy or just like the mood changes, I'm going to lean into that and then
mm,
move forward. So that's kind of what we are talking about when talking about
mm,
having that
mm.
capacity to tailor your self-care activities, and also showing your self-compassion if you're not feeling up to it, because there are hormonal changes that are happening.
I love that. Yeah, it's kind of like this idea of when I'm putting cocoa powder in everything I'm eating, to be aware of where I am in my cycle and to, like you
Yeah.
said, lean into it and just say, like, this is a time when everything needs to be chocolate. So,
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. And there's actually solid research that if you want to change habits or create habits, the follicular phase is the time to do it. So the first
Mm,
half of your cycle, that's when you want to do it, because you have this increase in follicle stimulating hormone, you have this
mm,
increase in estrogen and testosterone that lends really well to having the mental capacity to do that, because your estrogen, your hormones and your neurochemicals and your whole
mm,
biochemistry, like they all, have this interplay, and we sometimes forget about that. Um,
mm,
and women traditionally have been under researched also. So like a lot of this isn't taught to us. It's something we know about our bodies, but we kind of tend to ignore because the norm of discussion doesn't really engulf like
mm,
this area of information.
It's like there's an expectation that things should be flatlined, but we're really
Yes,
going on a little bit of a roller coaster or a bumpier
100%.
road, yeah, throughout the
Yeah.
month.
And we can
Really
definitely see how much of a roller coaster we've been in just like the last 2 weeks.
Yes. So
And
we
that's
are,
in addition to our cycles.
yeah. So like we are coming at you guys live from in the thick of the COVID-19 crisis. This is March 26th today, March 26th.
Yeah, I think so. I have no concept of time. Yeah.
Yes, we are working from our homes. We are social distancing, and we're actually going to talk about self-care because both of us have both have our own challenges, like our sort of group challenges, self-care challenges that we're presenting to our communities. And Anne has one dedicated to self-care, especially in this time. And can you tell us about it? Do you have a 7-day self-care challenge going on right now?
Yeah, I have a 7-day self-care challenge, which I partially made a little bit selfishly because I'm in need of that and I want people to do it with me. And I also had requests from patients in my community to do something like that. So they're all like quick and easy things to do. I feel like sometimes we overcomplicate self-care. Self-care really can take as little as 10 seconds and can take as long as, weeks on end if you wanted it to. But my goal was to basically just get us to do things that help us feel like ourselves. So every day is a different challenge. There's a video that goes along with it, and I'm doing them as as we go along. And actually, I love the first activity that's in there, which is creating a self-care reference guide.
Oh, tell us about that.
And I do this with when I do self-care talks and stuff like that. Well, that's one of the activities that I love doing, because sometimes when you're like in a funk or just not feeling like yourself, you're like, oh, I don't know what's going to get me out of this. So if you have something to look at and be like, okay, you know what, I can drink it, make myself a cup of tea, or I can just like do 2 minutes of exercise, or whatever the case may be, and try to get out of this funk that I'm in. I feel like it's helpful to have something written down or easily accessible. So the exercises, you divide a piece of paper into 4 quadrants, and then you do things that help you, that are your self-care activities on a daily basis, something you can do on a weekly basis, monthly basis, and a yearly basis. So daily for me, for example, looks like some kind of movement. It doesn't have to be, some big 30-minute or 60-minute workout. It could be as simple as going for a walk, or doing 10 squats, or lunging around the house, or dancing around the house. I practice gratitude before I sleep. I drink a cup of tea. That's definitely one of mine. Running is not my thing, so running is never on any of my self-care lists.
Yes.
And then weekly, it looks like I am part of a community band, so that's one of my weekly self-care activities. Talking to a friend on the phone, doing a face mask. Monthly sort of things look like getting a skincare treatment from someone, or taking a bath once a month, actually meeting a friend in person. And then yearly can be travel or hosting an event or something like that. So I like the idea of having something. So the daily ones you don't have to schedule in, but the other ones I actually schedule them into my calendar, because then I'll actually do them.
So it doesn't get away from you. So you're like, oh, this month I know this is my self-care commitment to myself that I'm going to do. I'm going to go get a massage, or I'm going to do a float tank, or whatever it is. That's so cool.
And for you, it could be like surfing. I know you like to surf.
Yeah. Let's try and make that a weekly thing, but it's ending up being monthly. It's kind of like whenever I can, whenever there are ways.
For sure. Yours is also weather dependent. So.
Oh my gosh, yeah, whatever. But yeah, so you were saying, so it's a 4 quadrant graph, and it's daily, weekly, monthly, yearly.
Yeah, actually I have mine here. Let me show you.
Yeah, let's see.
So it looks something like this.
Yeah.
I think that says daily, weekly, monthly, and a yearly, or it could be quarterly or annually, something more long term. And the reason why I care so much about self-care is because self-care helps us refill our cups. And that's the only way we can show up for ourselves, for our dreams and our goals, for the people in our life in our best capacity. Like I know I'm super irritable if I'm not taking good care of myself. I procrastinate more. I'm less productive. I snap at my mom and my husband a lot more. And I also make poor life choices in terms of like eating and not exercising. Like everything kind of gets derailed if I'm not taking good care of myself.
Yeah, we always think like, I know I've been through a journey where I regarded self-care as being selfish, and I had to really work through that and understand that by filling your own cup, you're then able to help other people. And so it's the least selfish thing you can do is take care of yourself.
Yeah, completely
sort of like
agree with that.
Like it's like lending your friend your iPhone when the battery is totally dead. It's not help to anybody. It's like, here, I'm going to recharge it, and now you can borrow it for the whole day. So this is this idea of and the metaphor of the oxygen mask, like you're putting the oxygen mask on the plane on yourself first, and then helping others. what are you seeing that people needed help with? So in light of this COVID-19 and your community reached out to you and were asking for this self-care challenge, what were they
Mhm.
struggling with?
A lot of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety is a big one that's coming up, and I can definitely relate to that because I've felt anxious a lot this whole last week, week and a bit. Um, and there's so much uncertainty, right? And uncertainty brings on anxiety because we don't know what life looks like. We had a schedule and now the rug's been pulled from under our feet, and we're like, how do I get my bearings again? So there's been a lot of anxiety, and actually a lot of news related anxiety. So people are like, you know what, every time I watch the news, I just feel so anxious. So one of the
Mm-hmm.
strategies that I've been implementing myself and with and recommending to patients is actually, let's limit that time that you're ingesting news
Mm-hmm.
to like one time or two times a day and no more, so that you can get out of that state and do something else that brings you joy or brings you peace, or connect with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, anxiety is a big one. What else am I seeing? And some despair. There's a lot of loss, right? Loss and powerlessness that people are feeling as well. From again the loss of structure, loss of vacation, loss of routine, loss of income for a lot of people. So
Mm-hmm.
there's and those are totally normal. I'm sure, I know we've talked about it, that
Mm-hmm.
we've been feeling some of these things as well. And I know I have. There was a day where I definitely like just cried for a bit and let it
Mm-hmm.
all out, which I think is fine, right? Like we got to
Mm-hmm.
let those emotions out as well, and then regroup when we get a chance, and then do the things that help us
Mm-hmm.
through this time, and maybe create new routines.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I actually I heard this from a friend, and she gave this metaphor, which I actually really love. It's like we had been juggling all these balls
Mm-hmm.
before COVID-19, and then when it hit, we dropped all our balls, or the universe you caused
Mm-hmm.
all our balls to drop, and now we have the opportunity to pick the balls that we actually want to pick and move forward with, and not stick with the same routine that we were in the past. And I
Mm-hmm.
really loved that, because I do feel like, especially in the last couple of days when I have been feeling a little bit better than last week, I've done a bit of a reframe as to how do I want my life to look like once this is done, and what are the things that I want to continue with, what are the things that I want to let go of, what are the things that I want to do more of. So like, just sometimes my husband and I are in the same house every day, but we don't really spend time together, like
Mm-hmm.
connecting, you know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
but I want more of that. So this is a nice time to, I don't know if it's a nice time to, but it is a time to
Right.
reevaluate some of those things, because we have the time to do that.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. So it's like a time. I was listening to something today, and it was saying this is a time when we're staying home, but not just in our physical homes, in our internal homes as well. And it was interesting because in talking to patients this week, so I, yes, saw tons of anxiety, lots of grief. I shared an article actually about how a lot of what we're feeling is this grief over the loss of our lives, like our normal lives.
Yeah.
But I also was noticing that even some of my patients with anxiety, it was mixed in with a little bit of this sense of like, oh, my really stressful job uh, that was causing me all this anxiety. I now have a break from, and I'm staying home. And some people were commenting that their kids were saying things like, "Mom, can we do this for the rest of our lives? Like just hang out at home all day?" And I think it's a mixed bag, right? Like, because there is this time for reflection, and there is this time to relieve ourselves of these stressful things. Like I no longer need to go and do all these errands because I can't. So these obligations that were on us previously are now no longer on us. But then there's this uncertainty, like you said, about the future, that and this lack of control about how other people are behaving, um, this lack of knowledge about this infection, and then just how long this is going to go on, or what this means for our goals and dreams, right? Things that we care about. So it's a complicated time, a lot of
It's
emotion.
definitely a complicated time. And same thing, I have also been receiving comments that it's a bit of a relief to not do all the things that we normally do and just spend time with partners or family members, or alone, whatever the case may be. And people are doing stuff around their house that they thought they would never be doing, or they wouldn't be doing for a while. And it's also really lovely how communities are coming together, and there's so much
Mm,
compassion as well, right? Like there's lots of strife, but there's also lots of like positives coming from it. And I think the mind shift just keeps teetering and tottering for all of us.
yeah, like I've seen so much creativity flourish from people during this time, and then yeah, a lot of giving, like you said, a lot of connection, and I don't know. Yeah, there's something, even though it's all on social media and all on the internet, there's something where I was walking and walking my dog, and I ran into two people I don't know. We're keeping our 6 feet apart from each other, but we're stopping to talk. And that would never have happened if we were just going about our regular lives. So it was a really neat thing. Had
Yeah.
this small town type feel, but in the middle of downtown Toronto. So that was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so with your self-care, what are the daily things you're doing during this time? So you started the self-care challenge partly to help yourself stay accountable, and I totally get that. Like you're like, I need to be meditating every day, so let's do a challenge and let's get everyone to do it. But what are you talked about some of your daily things, but what are the things you're finding are helping right now?
Right now, daily, I'm talking to someone. That's
Mhm.
really helping me right now, for sure. And some of that is just friends, some of that is just my mom, some of that is like colleagues, for example. I know we've talked before,
Mhm.
and other groups of colleagues as well. So that's been really helpful. I've been reading more, which is also helpful. It gets me out of like, up here into just like focusing on the words on the page. That's been super helpful. I'm still drinking my tea.
Mhm.
I'm doing daily movement, typically outside. My
Mhm.
workspace actually has this, it's not really a balcony, it's just you can open the door and stand there with a grill.
Oh.
So I stand there a lot, and there's a lot of dogs on my street, so I just watch them. That's
Yeah.
really been helpful too, and dog videos. Like
Oh yeah.
I love dog videos, so I watch a lot of those, and usually my husband and I will watch them together. And the other thing that my husband and I are doing more of is playing games, so like board games or video games. We typically play them, but in the last, I would say 2 3 months, that went out the window. So we've been
Mm-hmm.
spending a little bit more quality time that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like doing this, like you said, quality time,
Yeah,
where it's like it's not just sort of being in each other's presence while you're going about your busy lives. Like, let's play a board game. Let's do
yeah,
something that gets us off the internet, but helps us connect at the same time and passes the time a little
for
bit.
sure, absolutely. How about you? What are you doing these days to get you through and to support your body and mental health?
Yeah, like so last week my community was saying we're commenting about, I'm overeating and I'm lying on the couch all day, and what do you have
Oh
any
yes.
recommendations? Yeah. And I responded, I had like an answer at the ready, right? I was talking about building in routines and why we might be kind of, have the munchies around this time, because it's not full on fight or flight anxiety. It's more of this low level anxiety that typically gets us eating. Like we're kind of bored. It's that like low level kind of thing. So I had all these answers and I was talking about routines. And then I sat with myself this weekend and realized that I don't really have great routines. I wasn't really doing it. So I started thinking more carefully about how I'm actually structuring my day and what my goals are for the day. There's been a huge change in my practice. And sometimes I have an entire day that's open, which can be very stressful if I just sit and think about all the things I can't control. So I'm waking up with an alarm, as I normally do, having my breakfast. I usually start my morning with food, always, which is part of my cortisol care challenge, is talking about protein in the morning, and my coffee, which is my devil's version of your tea, is my self-care. So I'll have my coffee and maybe read something, and then go walk my dog. So I'm walking my dog a few times a day, and that's really nice. It also helps me not feel guilty about getting outside, because I know even in countries where there is full-on lockdown, there are exceptions for pharmacies, grocery shopping, and dog walking. Where my friend and I were laughing about that, because my friend's like, well, we need to walk too, but the dogs, the dogs are really an exception. So I'll walk him a few times a day, just get outside. And I have a movement practice. So I would normally go to the gym But since gyms have been shut down, uh, I've been finding it really hard to work out on my own, to follow a yoga class. Like I find it so easy to just grab my yoga mat and head to a structured yoga class for an hour or even 2 hours and stay motivated. Because there's something about just surrendering to what's happening in the class and just following instructions. Whereas, and it takes a lot for me to, like, I wouldn't leave a class even if I was bored halfway through. But when I'm doing it on my own and I'm watching a video and I'm in my house and I'm not accountable to anyone, there's no sort of space that we're creating, it's hard for me. So I'm trying to commit to at least like 13 minutes, 30 minutes of yoga, and trying to do that daily because it's really important for my body to do yoga. I've been noticing. Following like normal eating routines and not being like, it's 10, let's have an early lunch at the sink. Like, let's sit down and eat properly.
Yeah.
Which I realized I wasn't doing. I thought I was, but then I actually thought about it. I'm like, no, I had like 5 meals today. Healthy meals, but 5 meals.
Yeah.
So just sort of structuring in a routine, like organizing what I'm going to have for lunch as if I was taking it to work, planning my day around a goal that I want to accomplish, getting outside a lot. And like you said, talking to people. And there's a program for mental health. So for people with, it's mainly for people with depression, that's been developed by psychiatrists, and it's evidence-based program, very simple lifestyle-based program. And and it's called the Wild 5 Wellness. And one of the 5 pillars is social interaction. And their challenge, or the advice they give, is just to call or see in person. But now our option is only to call 2 people in your life a day. So I'm thinking about if I'm doing that, and I'm actually pretty good at sticking to that, I think, and which has been really important, because otherwise to just be completely alone or just being in a texting sort of interaction with people is not enough. I went surfing yesterday, but I just got a notice that the parks are closed. So I'm not sure if surfing is open, although I was there by myself, so I was definitely social distancing. There are people on shore looking at me like I was crazy, but that's kind of normal because it's still March in Canada. Yeah, that's my self-care routine. So yeah.
I love that. I love the scheduling, and yeah, that is something that I have a lot of scribbles in here, and these are actually like my to-do list for the day. And so I have like work related stuff that I want to do, but I also put in like my exercise, cook, read. Like I'll put other things. So for 2 reasons, I'm going to look at it and be like, okay, I'm going to do these things. And number 2, I can cross them off and get some dopamine being released for accomplishing things. Yeah. Because like that's, for me, I need that motivation personally. I know that about myself. There's like intense satisfaction that comes from crossing things off my list. So I definitely am doing a little bit more of that. There's something else that you said that I really resonated with. I can't remember though. So when it comes to me, I'll let you know.
It'll come up. Yeah, because I wanted to say something too, like when you were talking about your grid, and then even now with dopamine. So I think it's so useful, right, to have these things written down, like your self-care cheat sheet, like you said, because one of the conversations I have with a lot of my patients is they're like, when I get home from work, my battery's completely depleted, and what I end up doing, so my goal for myself is to go to a yoga class or go to a pottery class or do something that I know is going to be nourishing. But what I end up doing is buying a bag of chips, sitting on the couch and flipping through my Instagram, this kind of mindless thing. And so we talk about 2 neurotransmitters that are kind of in charge of either of those situations. And one is dopamine and the other serotonin. And I think with dopamine, dopamine is like our dog chasing the ball neurotransmitter, where it motivates us to do something, to pursue something, to seek out a certain behavior. And so we get hits of dopamine even in planning activities. So if you think about going to buy a bag of chips, if the chips have given you a hit of dopamine in the past, it gives you a hit of dopamine to even plan to do that. And then something like Instagram, you don't really necessarily need to put effort into engaging with that medium, but you do get little mini hits of dopamine as you're playing around with it. But these things are not nourishing. And so going to your yoga class, going to your pottery class maybe doesn't provide that same anticipatory motivation or excitement. But when you're in it, it creates serotonin hits. And so it feels really good while you're in it and afterwards. And so a lot of those things on your self-care list are these like serotonin boosters, but you're not necessarily going to crave your cup of tea. I mean, after time, maybe like, oh yeah, what I really need
Yeah.
is a cup of tea.
Yeah.
But for me, I'll crave coffee because I'm like, it's gonna get me,
Right.
it's gonna get me high.
And that actually, you hit the nail on the head. Like, that's something actually I was going to speak to that I forgot about,
Mm-hmm.
is like sometimes we actually have to force ourselves to do the things that will be good for us. Like, like sometimes you have to force yourself to go to the yoga class. Like, I don't know about you, but I know like I love my Sunday evening rehearsals with my band. But and I know like if I go, I will feel amazing. I will feel awesome afterwards because I love it. However, sometimes getting to there, even though it's 5 minutes away from me, that's the challenging bit. And that's when I'm like, oh, but it's so comfortable here. I don't want to move.
Yeah,
And
because you
then
don't crave
now,
it.
exactly. So for accountability, like for me, like I do it with my husband for some things, but I definitely need that external motivation. So he reminds me, he's like, yeah, but you love band. Like that's all he has to say. I'm like, it's true, I love band. I'm gonna go. But like but I'm sure you do this too. Like when we're talking about creating shifts and habits, I always get patients to write down what's the motivation behind this? What are you going to feel afterwards? Why do you want to actually do this? Because we forget, right? Like, and it's a pretty normal process to forget. And we get busy and things go out the window, and having it written down. I love writing things down, as you can see from my scribble.
Yeah.
I think it's a super helpful tool. Yeah.
Yeah, you get the dopamine hit when you check it off. So like there's your dopamine right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great point because it's sort of also dopamine is in charge of our decision making. And so if you need to make a lot of decisions, it's sometimes just not going to happen. And so for me, the success with exercise was just having it in a schedule and just going. And it wasn't really a negotiation with myself. It was like the alarm went off and you go through the motions, you just end up in the class. Now it's tough because our routines are shifted. So we have to like really schedule things in again so that we don't have to make decisions. So it's not like, what am I doing now? Am I cooking? Am I grocery shopping? What am I cooking? Am I doing yoga? Am I doing my virtual gym kickboxing class? Am I going for a walk? It's like, no, it's yoga. It's 2:00. It's happening. Then you feel good after and it's done.
Yeah, you almost had like muscle memory of like your schedule, and now your muscles are like, what do I do?
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
like,
so now you have to retrain.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you have to shift and retrain, and it's hard.
Yeah, and it's tough because I think a lot of us are, at least last week, I was really feeling like, oh, this is all going to be temporary. Like we'll be back. And my clinic was closed officially for 2 weeks. It's like, oh, I'll be back next week. It's not looking like that right now. And so it does seem like it's pertinent to be creating these routines again and sort of settling into, even when you go on vacation. I think if you're sort of staying in a place for a while, like we'll still create routines when we're on vacation. Like our bodies really love routines because it takes the decision making out of these things we need to do to nourish ourselves. Like we need to sleep, we need to eat, we need to move. And so if those things are all planned, then they're taken care of, and we can spend our mental energy on being creative and following other goals, which is really good.
For sure. Yeah. Decision fatigue is,
Yes.
not fun to deal with.
Exactly. Yeah, we call it decision fatigue, also like prefrontal cortex fatigue. It's like our dopamine fatigue, and this is the whole idea of, I had one patient talk about how she would have such bad decision fatigue that she would sort of be halfway through a task and then just stop. And so we really talked about how, we really need to just build in systems that run themselves. Sort of, it's like you have this team of employees doing your work for you. It's really you doing it, but you're not putting in the mental energy to get all of that stuff done. Like you're kind of mindlessly making your sweet potato because it was planned in your schedule and you knew that you were going to do it, and it was planned that you were going to buy the sweet potato and have it. And then you can use your brain for what you want to use it for, which is maybe daydreaming or listening to podcasts or creating things and all of that stuff, and not having to make decisions around all these things. So it's a good point. So the self-care list. And do you have any other take-homes, things that you've learned in this journey of putting together your new routines during this time, or things that your community has pointed out, or any other tips from your self-care challenge that you want to share?
The biggest one I'll say is really just forgiving myself.
Mm-hmm.
We're all in it. We're all in it together. We're all creating these new routines, and routines don't, get made in a week. It takes more time than that. When we're talking about habits and changing behaviors, 21 days and then 62 to 65 days, that's what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And the routines that we had for so many years, pretty much, those have now shifted. So
Mm-hmm.
really being forgiving of myself is a big one that I will say is really important at this point in time, because I'm used to like getting things done, right? Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
used to getting things done in a certain fashion, in a certain manner, and it can be really destructive if I go down that if I ride down that spiral of feeling that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second one, like you said, and like we just talked about, is actually building a routine and writing things out. Like I think that's been super helpful for me. And I've heard that from so many people this week as well, that we've actually made to-do lists. We've made things
Mm-hmm.
that we want to do, and vision boarding. Everyone's this week, that's the second thing that I heard,
So
was
cool.
vision boarding, which goes back to like picking up the balls that you want to pick and then
Mm-hmm.
moving toward that. And
Mm-hmm.
taking it day by day. The situation is changing on a very rapid basis, but it does look like we're going to be here for some time. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, those are my 2 cents.
Those are great things. Yeah, it's like you're kind of, I always think of surfing metaphors, but you're basically trying to stay balanced on your board while during the, and these are not clean waves we are dealing with. These are very choppy, messy waves that we can't see or read properly. But these things like vision boards and to-do lists, or I've also heard of have done lists, which I like too. I
I
did a
love have
hands
done
of
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like grocery shop. Oh, I've done that. I just want to like write something so I can check it up. But these things that they help us stay oriented to like, what kind of day did I have today? I don't know, because it's totally different from what I
Yeah.
would have had 2 weeks ago. So I feel like I'm useless. I feel like everything's falling apart. And then you sit and look at your to-do list or your vision board and you know, I'm on track. The big things, the big balls are up in the air. That didn't sound right, but you know what I mean. The important balls. Yes.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's true though. Like some days I'm like, what did I even do today?
Mm-hmm.
Which is totally fine. Like if you do nothing on a day, it is totally
Right.
fine.
Yeah.
um, but but I do want to get some things done in this time. So having a list of some kind, and going through my day, even reflecting at the end of the day, has been helpful. I'm like, okay, today I cleaned the kitchen. I baked some
Mm-hmm.
zucchini loaf, which are things that I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I had intended to clean my closet, which I will proceed to do at least a little bit of. And
Mm-hmm.
even if it's like an incomplete task, that's still, you made progress. And that's really what we should be. We should be celebrating anything that we're doing or not. Even like giving into your emotions in a day, I feel like that's worth celebrating, because like this is a weird time.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Rudolf Steiner talks about that. One of the founder of Waldorf, among other things, he talks about at the end of the day. I forget what he calls it, but you go through the events of the day in reverse. It's like I just put myself to bed, I just brushed my teeth, and you sort of like digest it all. It's cool. It's yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's beautiful because it sort of just orients us to like rather than just heading through the day, face forward, like leaning in. We're sort of okay. What was that like? And savoring the experience of being alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so, where can we find you? How can we get in on this challenge? And
So my challenge is up you can always find me on Instagram. I'm pretty active on there. Not as much these. I would say like it's hit or miss these days. Some days where I'm feeling it, I'm on there a lot, and then other days where I'm like, I'm just gonna take a step back. But Instagram, my handle is dr.annehussain. So my full name, and then the challenge is available through there in my bio, or you can go to annhussain.com/selfcare, and you can access my challenge through that as well.
all right, we'll have links at the bottom of this video on YouTube and in the description, and then in Facebook, we'll put it in the comments. All right, Anne, thank you so much for joining me. You're also
Thanks for having me.
you're part of the Good Mood Project group,
I
so
am. I love the
people
Good Mood
can
Project.
directly message you if they want to. They can
Of
tag you
course.
and comment and ask questions.
Yes.
So take care and have a
You
good day.
too.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.